Quarter 4, Module 7, entitled Drawing Conclusion about Population Mean based on the Test Statistic Value and Critical Region. In general, if the absolute value of the computed value is greater than the absolute value of the critical value, we reject the null hypothesis. So, kadto ang bantayanan ninyo. Kung ang absolute value sa imong test statistic, katong imong gisolve, is greater than the absolute value sa imong critical value, or kadtong naa sa table, we reject the null hypothesis and support the alternative hypothesis. But if ang kabaliktaran na siya, but if the absolute value of the computed value is less than the absolute value of the critical value, we do not reject or we fail to reject the null hypothesis. And the alternative hypothesis is not supported. So, nato ang basihan nato. So, rejecting the null hypothesis doesn't mean that it is incorrect or the alternative hypothesis is correct. The collected data suggests a sufficient evidence to disprove the null hypothesis. Hence, we reject it. Pasabutan na it. Kung gi-reject nimo si null hypothesis, dili pasabot say bottom line ani, kung gi-reject nimo si null hypothesis, dili pasabot ana nga incorrect na imong null hypothesis. Tapos si alternative is correct na. Based lang manggod sa data, ang data lang suggest sufficient evidence to disprove. So na lang kay sufficient evidence na ma-disprove nimo si null hypothesis mo to gi-reject nimo. Similarly, if a failure to reject the null hypothesis does not mean that it is true, only that the test did not prove it to be false. There is an insufficient evidence to disprove the null hypothesis. Hence, we do not reject it. Kung baga, mura ragunig sa korte, dili tanang acquitted nga mga criminals. I mean, let's say na ay suspect di ay, kung suspect ka, ilitison ka sa korte, pag abot sa kaso, pag final judgment sa judge, kumbaga, acquitted, pasabot na, acquit is wala na sentensyahan. Let's say, ang kaso nimo is kawat or kanang pangurakot, kumbaga. So let's say ang judgment is acquitted, dili pasabot nga wala ka nang dili pasabot nga katong suspect wala gyud nang urakot. Wala lay sufficient evidence nga maka-prove nga nangurakot siya. Mo nay pasabot atong mo nay wala lay ebidensya, kumbaga ba. So mo tong acquitted siya. Murag nga ana nga punto sa rejecting and failing to reject. When you say na-reject nimo, dili pasabot nga dili na correct siya. Depende lang dito sa data lang ang nagtuan nimo. Na lang siya ebidensya gyud nga kailangan i-reject. Kung dili nimo i-reject, na lang gyud siya ebidensya nga dapat dili i-reject. Murag ana ang pasabot ani sa hypothesis testing. That is all about that will all boil down sa data nga na imong nakulat. So based sa data, sufficient ba siya or insufficient ba siya to prove or disprove the null hypothesis? So let's discuss some examples. So sa kani nga goal is kailangan na nato mag-conclude kung i-reject ba siya or not. So, first problem is to compute for its value. Given the following information, use alpha 0.02, then interpret the result. So, based sa given, kung tanaw na to, given na si null hypothesis o alternatives. Tapos, mauna po ni natay, sample mean, population standard deviation, population mean, and the sample size. So, based sa given, let's first determine, okay naman si alternative hypothesis, let's determine kung unsa nga test atong gamiton. So based sa ato ang alternative hypothesis, greater than man siya. So this suggests na one-tailed test ta. Ang pangutana, unsa nga test? Z-test ba or T-test? Adto ta sa atong standard, population standard deviation. Since atong population standard deviation is known and atong sample size is greater than 30, so meaning we will use the Z-test. So for Z-test, pangitaon na tong critical value sa Z-test na to. Kung saan na to papangita sa critical value, again, based na ta sa alternative hypothesis na to. Kung unsa nga, one-tailed test ba siya or two-tailed test. So since greater than siya, nga symbol ang atong alternative hypothesis, one-tailed test ta. Tapos, ang atong alpha is 0.05 or 5%. So naara. Positive or negative 1.645. Since ang symbol na to is greater than, so ang positive ato ang gamiton. So that's positive 1.645. If we draw the graph or we sketch the graph, tinganing itsura niya. So positive 1.645 na adari banda dool sa 2. So ang rejection region na to naa sa right niya. Ang diring nasa left niya is the non-rejection region. So nanatay graph karon. Morning boundary na to ang positive 1.645. So after that, we now determine the test statistic. Again, since Z-test ta, kani nga formula atong gamiton. And we simply substitute the given values sa sample mean, sa population mean, sa population standard deviation, o sa sample size. And we solve that one. Human naman ta ating nga topic actually. Na-discuss na nato ni, i-solve na lang din. And then, na-come up tag, value nga, Z is equivalent to 1.875. Then, after makita na nimo ang value sa Z statistic, locate that one sa imuhang graph. Asa na banda? Asa na fall? So, kung ato nang sketch, si Z 1.8, na dere. Naaman si 1.6, so mas unahan pa siya kang 1.6. So kung tanaw na to, asa siya nga region na fall. So klaro man nga under siya sa rejection region. So based from that, we can now decide kung i-reject or i-reject ba nato or delete. So therefore, the computed Z value is 1.875, which is greater than the critical value of 1.645. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and support the alternative hypothesis. So, mao ni imong decision karon because kung tan-aw nimo sa graph, naa siya sa rejection region. Or kung wala tay graph, since ang atoang Z statistic is greater than your critical value, we reject the null hypothesis and support the alternative hypothesis. So, nga to pag-decide kung mag-reject or mag-reject or delete. I-reject ba si null hypothesis or delete? So, that's one example. Let's discuss another example. So, for this example, ang alpha this time is 0.01. Ang alternative hypothesis equal, ang null hypothesis equal as usual, but your alternative hypothesis this time is less than. Sample mean given, population mean given. This one S man eh, so sample standard deviation eh. And N na to is what? 12, which is less than 30. So based from this, unsa nga test ang ato ang gamiton? So since wala tay population standard deviation, ang available lang nga data is sample standard deviation, and then at the same time, sample size na to is less than 30, therefore, we need to use the t-test. So, ang atong gamiton, ang pangitaon na to nga critical value is sa t-table. Tapos, unsaon pagpangita sa critical value, sa t-critical value, dito na pugka sa imong alternative hypothesis. Since less than siya, one-tailed ta. So, tan-out ta sa one-tailed. And then, alpha na to is 0.01. So, mangita tag 0.01. And then, we need the degree of freedom. Degree of freedom is n minus 1. Since n na to is 12, kaya ang degree of freedom na to is 11. So, dirita magtanaw. Shortcut na lang na ko ni 1, 2, then 11. So, diri ang iyahang intersection. One-tailed 0.01, then 11. So, that is 2.718. And then, since less than man is siya, therefore, negative value atong gamiton. And less than is naa sa left. So, ang atong graph naa sa left. And negative 2.718, dool siya kay negative 3. So, naa sa left side ang atoang, this is a left tail test. Ang atong rejection region, so nasa right si acceptance or non-rejection region. So, after na to ma-determine si critical value, we now determine the test statistic, which is t value. Kailangan na to paon ang t niya nga value, which is sa given data. So, kani nga formula, substitute lang nimo ang mga given, then solve. Then, ang na-solve na to is negative 1.736. So, we try to sketch that one sa asa na banda sa ato ang graph. Negative 1.76 is naana dere. Wala na kalampas sa 2. Sorry. Kung si 2 ni naana dere banda. Sinsya ha. So, naana na ba? So, dere si negative 1.736. So, klaro kaayo na asya sa acceptance or non-rejection region. So, by that, we can now have our decision. So, our decision should be the computed t-value is greater than the critical value at alpha greater than, okay. Or para mas dali actually, ani kato na lang general nga conclusion ganina to. Ang yang gipag-conclude man gud niya ani is the computed t-value is greater than the critical t-value, t-critical at alpha 0.01, that is mas dako man kaysa ani. Pero technically, kung ato ang katong gamito nato is ang katong general nga pag-conclude, ang absolute value sa negative 1.736 is greater than the absolute values, since the absolute value of negative 1.736 is less than the absolute value of negative 2.718. So, pwede na kani imong gamito na lang. Katong general, para dili libog. Since the absolute value of negative 1.736 is less than the absolute value of the 1. Pwede nga niyo, decision na to. Since the absolute value of negative 1.736 is less than the absolute value of negative 2.718, we fail to reject the path. We do not reject the null hypothesis. So pwede ra ing ana pod. Para ang ato ang focus lang is kung greater than ang mga absolute, kung greater than ang absolute value sa imong test, katong solve nga test, computed value kaysa sa critical value, reject. Pero kung less than, do not reject. So absolute value na lang atong gamiton para mas gamay ra ang memorization, para dili libog siya. So pwede ra ing ani inyong pagka-decide. Since the absolute value of negative 1.736 is less than the absolute value of 2.718, we do not reject the null hypothesis. So yung ato mag-decide. So last example. Whoop. Sige. Nalimtan lang ni kuan. Anyway, next is, so sa first example, na-present ko og z-test. Z-test siya because standard deviation, population standard deviation is given, then greater than siya sa greater than siya sa 30 ang sample size. Sa second, t-test ko yung gigamit because wala tayo population standard deviation, then less than siya 30. So kani, ang number 3 is word problem na gid siya. Kanina is given ng mantag mga kuan, kani word problem na gid ta. So example 3, the government claims that 10,000 pesos is the monthly expenses of a family with 4 members. A sample of 26 families has a mean expenses of 10,900 pesos and a standard deviation of 1,250. Is there enough evidence to reject the government's claim at 2.5%? So first, kailangan na to ang ilatag atong null hypothesis o alternative. So null hypothesis na to, mu equals gina usually. Mu equals katong population mean na to, which is katong claim. So actually, mauni ang gi-claim. So it is also advisable to label your claim. Then, a sample of 26 na ara, and a mean, so sample mean na po ni, ang 10,900. Then standard deviation of 1,250 pesos, then alpha na to is 2.5%, then yun, nanatay mu. Ang question man god, is there enough evidence to reject the claim? So wala siya gisulti kung greater than ba or less than. So therefore, atong alternative hypothesis is not equal. So from this given, wala tay standard population standard deviation, unknown. Sample size is less than 30. So therefore, t-test ta. So we need the t-table. So to determine kung unsa nga tailed, one-tailed, two-tailed, tan-out ta sa atong alternative hypothesis. Since not equal, so two-tailed ta. Tapos our alpha is 2.5. So pangitaon na tong 2.5 diri. That is 0.025. And then our degree of freedom is 26 minus 1, which is 25. So tan-out ta diri, so nara si 25. Intersection nila karon, tara, o kana. So since not equal ta, so positive and negative nga value atong gamiton. Kay not equal man. So two-tailed pud ta, so two tails ta. So tingani karon ang itsura sa iyahang graph. Positive 2.485 ug negative 2.485. So ang rejection regions na adire o naa. So both sides. While ang nasa center is the non-rejection region. So next ana is i-solve karon ang atoang test value. Ano t value nato. So use this formula, substitute the given, simplify, and then finalize your answer. So 3 decimal places. So then after, locate that one in your graph. Asa na si 3.651? 3.651 is na adere. So, klaro kaayo na siya sa rejection region. So, now, we can now decide. So, for the decision, so, kato nang gamiton. Since the absolute value of 3.61 is greater than the absolute value of 2.485, therefore, greater than man siya, basta greater than reject. Reject the null hypothesis. So that's the decision. Since naa na siya problem, we need to conclude. Kung walay problem lang, given lang ang mga data, walay problem, decision na kakutob. Pero since naa na tayo problem, we need to conclude. So, ang conclusion po nimo mag-base sa imong question. Ang question niya dire is there enough evidence to reject the government's claim? So, sa tong decision na to, i-reject man daw si null hypothesis. So, i-reject na to tong claim. So, nga to pag-decide. We can conclude that there is enough evidence to reject. Enough ang evidence to reject. Kaya kailangan man na to i-reject. So, there is enough evidence to reject the claim of the government that 10,000 pesos is the monthly expenses of family, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So, again, asa nigikan, dito sa question. Ang question man is there enough evidence? Since we reject, there is evidence. There is enough evidence to reject. So, that's how to conclude in hypothesis testing. So that's all sa drawing conclusion about population mean based on test statistic value and critical region. Thank you and see you next session.